So, Dr. Burgess, it's great to see you, my friend.
Good to see you again, Matt.
Thank you so much for joining us. I know we all wish that we could be doing this in person, but 2020, as it has had a custom of doing here for several months, had other plans. So,
Well, actually, I wear many hats, and one of my hats is a grandfather. And my daughter said that I would not be allowed at Thanksgiving dinner if I came to Indiana. So
that's
I had to
a
make
pretty
it
good
through.
reason. That's a pretty good reason. Yes. Well, we're so glad to be able to bring you here virtually to our stakeholders here in Northwest Indiana and beyond. We've gotten a lot of great feedback about the topic that we're here to talk about today, and I'm looking forward to our conversations. So.
Yeah, me too.
So just I guess I've gone over your bio with our listeners today, but I wanted to give you a chance to talk just a little bit about your background and sort of tell us your story a bit.
Well, I mean, I suppose for this audience, the most important thing is I'm a Hoosier, born and bred. I was born in Lebanon, down the road from where you are, and I was raised and I moved to Lafayette when I was 6 years old and went all the way through high school there. Went through Jeff. We used to beat Gary regularly in basketball, and Hammond and South Bend and all those places. And one of the highlights of my life actually was we went to the state finals 2 of my 4 years of high school, and I'll never forget. In my junior year, we got beat in the semifinals by this funny school called Christmas Addicts or something like that. Christmas Addicts, and they had a strange guy on there by the name of Oscar Robertson, and Big O they called him, and
he was pretty good.
Yeah, and one of my best friends, a guy who is still one of my best friends actually, he guarded Big O, and he said I held him to 31 points. And that's true. He did hold him to 31 points, but Big O only played a half, and they let him out. He came out the first half, played the whole game, came out for a minute of the second half, and for a minute at the end of the second half, didn't play the rest of the second half, and they still beat us. So, but it was a great experience seeing that guy play when he was still in high school. But no, I love Indiana. And I was going to go to Indiana University, and at the last minute, I decided to go to a small school. So I went to Knox College over in Galesburg, Illinois. My wife comes from Wisconsin, and so I'm a Midwesterner, born and bred. I taught at Ohio State University for over 10 years, and my eldest son, lives in Columbus today, and so I get back to that part of the country a lot. So it's great to be. I was really looking forward to coming back, and I had some free nights staying with relatives and so on lined up, but that has to pass this time. So I'm ready.
Next time, I have to comment. I'm very, very fond of what looks to be like an ascot that you're wearing there. Very stylish.
Oh no, actually, this is a mask. Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I wore this in case you sneeze.
That's pretty wise these days.
Yeah, the last time I talked to you, you were coughing. I thought, hey, I don't want to be near that guy.
Well, that's
no. Actually, I've had this on all day. I forgot to take it off, but I'll leave it on now.
It's serving dual purpose here, form and function. So kudos to you. So this is great. So you're a native Hoosier. You obviously are hitting on some key Indiana themes here already with Oscar Robertson and basketball. The topic that we've lined up for today, talking about regional transformation, talking about transit and connectivity oriented development here in Northwest Indiana. I wonder if you can maybe share a little bit about some of your background in major initiatives that you've been a part of. I mean, I know you've started a number of nonprofits. You've been part of corporate transformations of numerous global companies.
Yeah.
You've kind of been there and seen it all. So I wonder if you could take us down a little trip here through things that you've been a part of that maybe mirror what we're trying to do here.
Well, for many years, I worked in the West. I was head of the Western Governors for a while. I started something called the Center for the New West. I was head of something called the Federation of Rocky Mountain States. All those were regional organizations. And I've written quite a bit in the academic literature and elsewhere on regionalism. So, the opportunity that came up when you and I started talking to think regionally about a sub-state regional area is a very natural thing to me, and something that I've given a lot of thought to over the years, and where I've been active both as a architect in a sense and also as a leader. And so, but I think one of the most important things, about regionalism is it means many things to many people, and I think that it has some people expect too much out of it, and some people think it's a old hat. And I think neither one of those positions is correct. I'll come back to that. The other thing that I've had experience in, especially in Australia, was I've worked in the telecommunications industry the last 10 years of my career. And when we were first for US West, which is a Baby Bell, now part of CenturyLink, and in Denver, but from the years 2005 to 2009, I worked in Australia, where I was a C-suite member of the team that privatized Telstra, which is the largest telecom company in Australia. And there we not only privatized the company, but we led a transformation of a $30 billion company that had 60-some thousand employees, and had not just telecommunications but also media. The nation's cable TV system was part of what we did. So that transformation was a tremendous experience for me, and it also really helped me understand a lot, and from a totally different point of view, what's involved in the economic development exercise, from a business point of view. And so, I think that all the things that I've done in my life, from academic study of economic development and leadership, and the work I've done in the field, so to speak, as a player, and then number three, the experience I've had with two global companies, one of which went through a major transformation, has really been very helpful to me in understanding some of the challenges, but also many of the opportunities, and some of the of development and of change, of cultural change, and the things that you have to do to execute. It's one thing to think about these things, but and to launch something. It's another thing to make it happen, and that's really what I'm going to talk a lot about that today.
Oh, that's great. I think you'll have a very willing audience. There's, a lot of great vision that's been developing, I think, in Northwest Indiana in recent years, thanks to organizations like the Forum, like One Region, of course, where we're where we are today, thanks to our partners, throughout the nonprofit sector and the universities and our private sector partners. See, there's a civic leadership coalition that's really been coalescing, I think, around a shared desire to.
Yeah, one of the things that really has impressed me as I've looked at a lot of the material about Northwest Indiana, and also about Indiana itself, is the tremendous social capital that exists in Northwest Indiana around economic development. The One Region group, that's your group, as I recall, and then the Northwest Indiana Forum. I mean, those exist in other places. They're not unique, except that from everything I've seen, they're very active, very engaged in creating a vision and a program for this area. And I think that that just can't be overlooked. In fact, I think one of the most important things in doing something about this 3-county area, making things work there, one of the most important things will be having a forum where leaders from all sectors, government, the private sector, business, from the civic community organizations and others can, come together to talk about what's going on, to consider intelligence that comes from the community or from the forum itself, to evaluate what's gone on. That's really essential. But in addition to that, I think you also need to have, in what I call a civic leadership coalition, I think you also need to have an analytical capability. And I don't mean, one of the things I've noticed is that in the stuff that I've gone through since you and I started talking is how many reports have been done on this area. And they're good. They're interesting reports and informative and high quality from my point of view. But the issue is, how do you turn these into action? How do you turn these into results? And I think that's where a civic leadership coalition with a forum and then with an analytical capability. And I'm not talking about, primarily going outside the forum for the analysis that has to be done. But I think that you can use the resources that are contained in the forum. You can use the universities that are part of the forum. You can use the analytical capabilities that exist in some of the corporations or some of the community organizations that are a part of the forum. And just like, project work is now increasingly defining the way we do work in the private sector, we can do project work on economic development on a regional basis and bring in talent and skills from the participating organizations without having to spend a lot of big bucks with outside consultants. Now, you may want to bring outside consultants in now and then for one thing or another, but I think a lot of the analytical capabilities that you want to build into the civic leadership coalition can be harnessed from within. The third thing that you want with a civic leadership coalition, besides the forum and the analytical capability, is that you really need to have a way for to evaluate, what's going on and to push the execution of the ideas and directives and missions and objectives that are advanced by the forum, and that's where, and to me, that's the most important thing. One of the most impressive consulting companies in the United States is Bain and Company, to my way of thinking. And one of the things they've invented and are well known for is something called the program office. When they do a transformation, they set up a program office, not to monitor, not to, keep track of the metrics and all that kind of stuff. It does all those things, but the primary purpose of a program office is to have 2 or 3 people who can then reach out and get the people they need when a problem comes up someplace, and then they coach the people through the problem. And I think that, that's really important to do, to have that program office, or whatever term you want to use to label it, but to have a group of people, highly skilled, who are trusted because they're part of your group, they're not outside your group, who can then harness talent and other resources as needed to step in where a problem arises. You never know where those problems are going to be. In a way, it's a lot like the agile process, the agile manufacturing process in software, where you start out generally knowing where you want to end up, but you meander all the way. Well, meander may not be the right word, but you learn from your mistakes and what you learn, and you learn from things you find out as you write the software. So it's always an evolution. You're always evolving, where you're going and how you get there. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of stuff that we do in the public sector and especially in the public-private partnerships, because we set these things up and then we give them to somebody to do, and then they're lost forever. They kind of either they work or they don't work, but nobody either ever knows. And by that time, you've got a bunch of CEOs, you got maybe a new mayor or whatever. And so I think, the first thing that I would say is that whatever you end up doing and whatever we end up talking about here tonight, we should, really give a lot of emphasis to execution. And that civic leadership coalition has to include more than a forum. It also has to include the analytical capability and the execution program office, whatever we want to call it.
Yeah, that's right in line with the aims of a group, many of whom are probably on the on the live stream right now. We have a regional opportunities council that's comprised of chief executives and other C-level executives from a lot of our private sector partners, and that's really been the kind of shift in focus as we have, as an organization, done a lot of ideating and visioning exercises. I think there's a lot of demand for execution and seeing some of these things come to fruition. And in particular, for one region, we have, our board and the membership of our Regional Opportunities Council have identified a couple of pillars for regional development, particularly focused on transit-oriented development, which you and I have talked a lot about in the last several weeks. And the topic du jour today, that notion of connectivity in general, roads, rails, blueways, greenways, fiber, connectivity.
Harbors.
Something, yes, harbors, exactly. We have some really unique assets here in Northwest Indiana in that domain. And so I wonder if, before we get too much into that, if you could maybe lay out sort of how you approach a particular project or a particular initiative, if you have a process, if you have kind of strategic questions that, that you typically use.
Well, one time I went to talk to a guy about a great idea I had, and I even practiced my little spiel, my pitch before I went in, and I got about 2 minutes into it, and he said, "Stop." I was about 32 years old or 35, something like that, and he said, I'm sure what you want to do is sound, and I'm pretty sure from everything I've heard, all want to be involved, but I really don't want to hear what you're saying now. I want you to come back when you can answer 5 questions. What's new? So what? Who cares? Isn't so-and-so doing that? Somebody else doing it already? And number 5 is, what's in it for me? Meaning not just for him, but for anybody who might contribute to it or participate in it or whatever. And when you say, this is really a unique area, everybody says their area is a unique area. But the interesting thing about Northwest Indiana is it is a unique area. I mean, the more I got into it, that's my home state, but I didn't know a lot about Northwest Indiana except for the dunes. And I used to go up in the summer and work for my grandfather, who owned an appliance store, but he also delivered Skell gas and bottled gas. And people who lived in the dunes, for their homes, they had bottled gas. And so I would always, go up to the dunes with my uncles and help deliver the gas up there every summer. I did that for about 4 or 5 years. And, but it's amazing. I mean, the South Shore of Lake Michigan is a huge asset. The Indiana Harbor is a huge and unique asset that gives that part of the Midwest a access to the deep sea lanes. All the interstates that go through there, 65, 90, 94, 80. I gave a talk, I gave the commencement address at the University of Toledo back in 1994, where I talked about the I-80 corridor and how much wealth exists along that I-80 corridor. If you go from from Buffalo to Chicago, you probably have more wealth along that I-80 corridor than you have in any but the top 20 countries in the world. And I think that that it's easy to let those words come out. This is really a unique area, but I think it's really true. And I think that in an age, especially in an age now where logistics and it have played such an important role in this new economy of wealth creation that has emerged in the last decade, that what you have is amazing. And of course you have the telecommunications connectivity to 5G and all that, and your region is pretty well covered by that from everything I can tell. In any case, what you have in that area is so powerful and so strong that I think that one of the most important propositions that you guys should be saying to yourself is what Tom Peters found a long time ago about successful companies, and that is build on your strengths, stick to your knitting, add value to existing activities. I think that that's not to say you aren't opportunistic. It doesn't mean that you don't leave the door open for that big company that wants to come in and build a distribution center or something. Or distribution center would be part of your knitting, I guess. But to build something that doesn't fit, because you can always make something that employs 1,500 people or 3,000 people fit. But to the extent that you focus on something, it seems to me that given all the assets that you have there, that focusing on sticking to your knitting and building on existing strengths is exactly what you ought to be doing. Now, the second thing I want to say is that I want to talk about this business of regions a little bit, because I've even read this in some of the articles about Northwest Indiana. People say, well, this isn't a real region. Well, it's only artificial lines and so on. Well, I take the view that what's a region's in the minds of the men who live there, and the women and the children. And I think that, you come together as a quote region because it makes sense. You come together because you can get economies of scale in the overhead costs of cooperation. You come together because by pooling your resources and your talent and your equipment and your all the things that all the resources that are required, people, money, space, equipment, technology, information, all these things can be done more efficiently and more effectively through collaboration. And if that collaboration happens to be in 3 contiguous counties, so much the better. And if those 3 contiguous counties are somewhere between 20 minutes and 65 minutes from Chicago, the 3rd largest city in the United States, so much the better. And if those 3 counties are on the south shore of Lake Michigan, which is part of the Great Lakes, which everybody in the world can identify. If you say, I come from the south shore of the Great Lakes, oh, I know where you come from. You say, I come from Rochester. Where's that? I come from, Roanoke, Virginia. Oh, I come from the south shore of the Great Lakes. Everybody knows where that is. And I think that all these assets are really important. And I think that that you create a region by how you think about it. I mean, there was a book written not long ago called "You Are What You Love," and the whole idea is that what you do, what you do is who you are. And if you act like a region, you're a region. If all you eat are vegetables, you're a vegetarian. And I think that we get all hung up on whether something's a quote real region or not. I've read so many of the economic development, so much of the economic development literature where people get wrapped around the axle about whether regionalism makes any sense or whether there are real regions or not. Or are you talking about a political region or an economic region or a manufacturing region or whatever? Well, to me, a region, if you want to call collaboration across jurisdictions a region, that's good enough for me. Because what we're talking about is a collaboration across jurisdiction. Now, let me say one other thing, and that is, I think that when you talk about the Northwest Indiana, quote, region, I think the way you really make progress is to focus on the cities in that region. People live in cities. They don't live in regions. They don't live in states. They don't even live in a nation, really. I mean, people live in a house or in an apartment on a street with neighbors where they go down the street to go shopping and buy gas and go to school and those kinds of things. That's where people live. And we need to get back to, I just today was reading some stuff about, globalization. And, these guys, I mean, they may have been Fulbright scholars and spent half of their life living overseas and consulting for U.S. Steel and people like that do live in a global environment. But really, 90% of the people in the United States, live in the neighborhood. And that neighborhood is in a city. And the actionable part of that person's life or that business person's life, the most actionable part is going to be the city and maybe the state. And for some, the federal government, when a COVID comes along or when tariffs come along or something like that. But most of the time, it's the city and the state. And I think it makes a lot of sense to start focusing, some of these, quote, regional efforts, these collaborative efforts on cities. And, it's very interesting that in the three counties, you have the biggest city and the county seat are usually not the same cities. I think each county has. So what if you started with, let's say, the county, the largest city in the county and the county seat in the county? What if you were to set up, guidelines through the forum for something you might call the eco cities, eco for E for economy, C for community, and O for opportunities. And what you want to have in these eco cities are guidelines on how you build the economy, on how the local people can build the economy, the private business leaders, the mayor, the city council, the county commissioners, all those people, the civic leaders, the church leaders, how they can build the economy, how they can build the community, the churches, the institutions of civil society, and also the places where people can recreate and sports and all those kinds of things. And then the opportunities for employment, the opportunities for entrepreneurship, the opportunities for education. And I think that, in fact, even since we started talking some months ago, I mean, the changes that have taken place are enormous. I mean, if you think about what COVID has done to how and what the aftermath is likely to be, it's amazing because there's already a trend toward telework. I first started writing about telework back in the 1990s. We had a telework center in one of our offices in California during that time. But telework has really taken off during this period. And guess what? People like it. They like working at home. And if it's not comfortable working at home, they go to the Starbucks. And if Starbucks doesn't work out, they go to Barnes and Noble because nobody else is there anymore. And people find places away from their home to do their work at home. And if they have to go into the office once a week or twice a week, they do it. But I can't tell you how many people I've found who say, one good thing about this is that I kind of like working at home. I kind of like being with the kids. I like the door to my bedroom, to our guest bedroom, which is now my office. But no guests want to come this time anyway. And when the guests can come again, he'll find someplace else to put his office. But I think that there's already been a movement away from separating the job from where you conduct the job, the work from where you conduct. That's not for everybody. I mean, if you climb telephone poles to install 5G, I mean, you can't work at home. And if you're a caregiver for the elderly, you can't work at home, but at least not your home. But I think that there are a lot of people who are going to be able to work at home. And if they can work at home, what's the difference between 5 miles and 25 miles? And what's the difference between 5 miles and 45 miles? And now we're talking about probably 80% of Northwest Indiana, if we're talking about people who are in Chicago. And I think that the second thing that's happening is what's going to happen to all these high-rise office buildings. If more and more people are working at home, then there's not as much need for office spaces in the past. So those offices are going to become something else. Who knows what? Shopping centers were already in trouble. Now they're in deeper trouble. Most of them, not all of them. Interestingly enough, in the part of the country where I live, the strip shopping centers are healthier than the big shopping malls. And so, I think we're in for a lot of changes, and the people that are listening to us now, they're more aware of all these changes than I am. But I'm just saying that just in my little part of the world, I can see the huge changes that are going to come about that really cancel many of the economic development ideas that we had 9 months ago. 9 months ago.
Right. Well, that is an excellent segue. I mean, looking at this moment in history where we have had this massive disruption on a global scale that, from the macro to the micro is changing the way that we live. It's changing the way that we work, the way we interact with people. I mean, what we're doing right now in this moment is a case study of that. Here we are in our respective studies, conducting this interview at a distance of several hundred miles. And, I think about what opportunities that may present for a region like Northwest Indiana that is unique. And it's unique largely because it's sort of in the middle of everywhere. I mean, you talk about, we have the Port of Indiana, which is one of the most commercially significant, busiest maritime shipping ports in the North American continent. You've got the convergence of major highways. And then the really big piece of news in recent months has been the acceleration of the two projects through the Regional Development Authority, the double track of the South Shore and the new north-south. It's called the West Lake Corridor, which is confusing, but it runs north-south from South Lake County into Chicago. I wonder if we can segue to talk a little bit about what this moment in time and our unique position here as a region that's in the middle of everywhere on numerous types of grids, what opportunities that presents for us to leverage those assets to build a better economic future.
Well, I think let me I want to answer that, but before we talk, let's talk about how you leverage a whole bunch of assets that I didn't even know existed. I've always been a fan of Mitch Daniels. I knew when I was head of the National Academy of Public Administration, he was head of OMB, and I got to know him then, and I followed his career. I followed his career when he was governor, and the work that he and subsequent governor, and I guess there's just been one since. Has there?
We have a second one now. Yeah,
second one. Yeah. But what the leadership of the state of Indiana has been outstanding, in my view. I mean, you're number one in almost everything. And if you're not number one, you're number two. And if it's not number two, it's top five. I mean, you just go down the list of all the things that Indiana is doing. It's doing well. And then I started browsing around on the website of the Economic Development Agency of Indiana, plus the economic development related agencies, and not just the agency itself. And my goodness, the number of the assets that exist there are huge. I don't know how anybody could responsibly use them, to their fullest extent. And so one of the things that's part of what that I'm suggesting today is this idea of setting up eco cities, people who want to play in the eco cities game. Each one's going to play differently, but one of the things that an eco city does is that it has the infrastructure to take full advantage of all the assistance that's available: technical assistance, financial assistance, knowledge and know-how in so many different areas that are available in your state. And I've worked in many states across this country. We had 16 states in the Western Governors. We had 14 states I worked with in the Center for the New West. I've worked with a lot of states. I'll tell you, it's hard to find a state that has the rich range and depth of assets that Indiana has to help those who want to, create jobs and build wealth and make life better for everyone. And so I think the first thing that you do is you get people working on that. But once again, Matt, I think it's really important not to have that done at the county level but done or at the regional level or the county, but at the city level. That's where people can really take advantage of that. Maybe what you do at the regional level is you have a couple of people whose full-time job is to help people navigate through and harness the resources that are available from the state, intellectual, know-how, financial, and others. And they can then pass those on to people who are nearby in a proximal sense, but also nearby in terms of trust and personal relationships. And that's hard to do. I mean, think about why was the extension service it was one of the great inventions of the American experiment in following the Civil War, when we set up the Agricultural Extension Service and the experiment stations. And then what they found out is they had all this knowledge from the experiment stations and the extension, but they didn't have people who knew how to use it. And so then they set up departments of agriculture to create farmers who were educated farmers. And then they had an experiment station that could help deliver, and county agents who could help deliver that knowledge to a farmer in a way that he could use it, package it in a way that he could use it. We're not doing that in other areas, and we know that it works. It's a process that works. And so we need to pay more attention to how we harness, package, and then pass on to end users, the enormous range of knowledge and experience and other assets that we have. And I think that's one of the things that the Eco Cities idea that I'm suggesting, that's another way it could work to help each of the cities. And, like I said, maybe you try to get the county seat and the largest city involved, but you let anybody play who wants to get involved. And they're all playing their own game, but they're playing by, within a framework of assets, not so much rules, but a framework of assets that is ever growing. And a lot of those assets are know-how. You're not talking about money, you're talking about know-how. And I think that, and then you get cities competing with each other to, see who can develop the fastest, quickest, highest, longest eco city. And then you get national media and regional media from the New York Times to the Chicago Tribune writing stories about the unbelievable things that are going on in LaPorte or Michigan City or Valparaiso or wherever it may be. And all of a sudden, people there, people outside are saying, hey, this is something I want to look into. And the people who live there say, hey, what we're doing makes sense. And when you have this kind of process that's an unending process, it's not a project, it's a process, and it's unending. Guess who also gets happy? Mayors get happy because they get, something to announce every third Thursday. The city council gets happy. And I'm not trying to be cynical about that. I mean, the elected officials want to see things happen, and when things happen, they want to take credit for it, and they should. So I think that, putting something together that's not a project, but it's a process of creating what I've just called them eco cities. So I can have something you could call it the South Shore cities, or call it whatever you want to call them. Come up with something even better. But they all have the same name. They're all part of the eco cities movement, but each eco city is different. You have an eco cities website because you want people in China and France and New York and Florida to look at it and to say, hey, maybe we ought to repatriate stuff into one of those eco cities in Northwest Indiana. But on that eco cities website, each eco city has its own section, and each eco city has different priorities, different aims, different things that it's doing. In part because it's got different assets, but also because you want to have that decentralized, so you do get competition, you do get people with different visions and better ideas about how things can be done, and to unleash that kind of creativity, and then have a forum where people can come together and talk about it, have actions so that newspaper people can write about it, and TV people can take pictures of it and tell stories about it. Pastors might even pray about it, And so I think that what I'm trying to suggest here is that we need to get out of this project orientation, this kind of event focused, project focused approach to economic development, and get into a process of building a high performance community that everybody can be proud of, where whether the community grows or doesn't grow, it can be high performance. There are a lot of communities that are not going to grow. There are some communities that are going to shrink. But just because you're not a growing community or a shrinking community doesn't mean you can't be a high performance community where, people get $1's worth of services for $1's worth of taxes, where the police have safe streets, where the trash is picked up on time, where the city hall is open at convenient hours so that working people can get in there, after work or on Saturday. That experiments with ways of making life better for people. That's what economic development's about. And we have this whole debate going on in the economic development community about, do you recruit firms, or do you recruit people? Or an issue that I've been very interested, that I've started talking about back in the late 80s and early 90s. I wrote newspaper articles about what I called hunting versus gardening, which has now become a concept that is debated in many economic development venues. And the fact is that when you hunt, when you try to bring people in from the outside, or a company in from the outside, they only come if they can bring people there. We live in a economy where talent is dear, where people are hungry for talent, and they're not going to move someplace where they can't get talent to move there. So gardening, which is to build up the attractiveness of an area, to have good schools, to have reasonable taxes, to have recreation areas and fitness centers and paths to walk on and bike trails to bike on, and all the things that contemporary people and families want to do. If you do that, that's gardening. Well, the best hunting is gardening, to my way of thinking. If you want to be a good hunter, be a good gardener first. Mm-hmm. And so every once in a while you'll land a big one by not being a good gardener. But good gardeners, number one, good gardeners will always have better odds at landing the big one. That's number one. Number two, if they don't land the big one, they still win. Because they're probably going to retain right. the people who are already there. Right. And, spoiler alert, 86 to 92% of the jobs in any community and in any state are by retention or by expansion. That's where they come from. The people are already there. So gardening is the way to make sure that you get that expansion and that retention that's needed to keep job creation going. And it's also the way to cover your odds for bringing in the big one if the big one comes along.
Absolutely. So for the folks that are tuning in right now, to recap, it sounds like your triage, your diagnosis of our region is that there are a lot of unique assets upon which we can build. That we don't have to necessarily be taking pie in the sky kinds of shots to try to bring things that aren't here. But how do, in light of the growth of the opportunity zones that have come into play as a result of the 2018 tax law, as a result of the efforts that are being made, particularly in some of the municipalities. You mentioned Michigan City, Hammond. One region has been working very closely with both of those cities, especially because of where they're located along the South Shore train. What are some things that can be done to really maximize the new connectivity that's being brought into play? These cities that are now linked even more closely to Chicago. We have a multi-jurisdictional trail project that we're working on right now called the Marquette Trail Greenway that will eventually, if and when it is completed, will link the city of Chicago all the way into Southwest Michigan. So how do developers, how do folks in the financial sector, how do city leaders, what are the various lanes that they're in? What can they do to continue to catalyze development of quality of life kinds of amenities along those really important transit and connectivity corridors?
Well, I think first of all, we've moved to a networked society by every measure. And one of the things that people need to keep in mind about networks is that the only place where you create wealth in a network is at a node. I mean, you don't create wealth along the pipeline, you create wealth at a pumping station. You don't create wealth along the freeway, you create wealth at the Cloverleaf. And if you don't believe that, ask Marriott. That's the only place for many years they would build a motel. And the same way goes for all the networks. And in telecommunications, the digital revolution it's changing everything. We knew we said that it would back in the 90s, and that's exactly what's happened. It's happened, I think, even more dramatically than anybody thought. But I think that what we have to also remember is that there's kind of, firms are in a way getting disembodied. I mean, people, the firm may have the top brass and some other people, at the quote headquarters, but the rest of the people may be on the airplanes, they may be at home, they may be whatever working, and they're talking on Zoom, or they're dealing with each other by emails or whatever. But the real important thing is, where are the people? And now there's an opportunity that even though the company is headquartered in downtown Chicago, the people may be living in Gary or Michigan City or one of these other places. And I think that it's also, and they may be living there for all kinds of reasons. Maybe they can, maybe some of the places they have to go, the commuter flights are more convenient than going to Midway or O'Hare, or maybe it's much better to have your sailboat down on the South Shore than it is up in the harbor, where it's going to cost you more than the sailboat cost just to have a slip. And so, the other thing about it is this whole business of the cost of living. I mean, the cost of living in Northwest Indiana is, from everything I've seen, and I've looked at some of the numbers, I mean, it's a step level lower than the cost of living in Chicago or in some of the suburbs. And also it's not just the cost of living, but it's also the investment values. I mean, in the old days, you could say, well, if you bought a house in Michigan City or in Valparaiso, it's not going to it's not going to increase in value the way it will in Chicago. Well, it may not as much, but now they're increasing in value. All I got to do is go try to buy one of them. I know somebody who just did. And, so housing values are going up. So the capital advantages of living in these, the capital gain disadvantages of living in some of these more remote areas has faded away. Plus the actual cost of living, the cost of healthcare, the cost of housing, the cost of transportation, the cost of education, the tax rate, all these things are much less in the eco cities than they're going to be in Chicago. And it seems to me that the more you can start focusing people's attention on the economic advantages, number one. Number two, the cultural advantages, because these days you don't lose that much by not being in Chicago. I mean, most of the stuff you can get on streaming video now, or streaming television, over the top television. Number three is that any place you want to go, you can go in an hour or so. If any place you want to go in Chicago, but you can have a quality of life that is unsurpassed in many of these cities and towns of Northwest Indiana. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, I used to love to go deliver gas, because it was not just Lake Michigan, the dunes, but it was also Lake Eliza and all these other, little lakes around the area. I mean, the scenery and the bucolic nature of many of the areas of this part. We think about the strip along the Indiana Tollway, or maybe I-80, but and that's one part of the region. But there's another part of the region that people who travel that never see. And that's why it's important to have these eco cities, because you need to do something that brings attention of the media to the other part of Northwest Indiana that the traveler who's passing through doesn't see.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think the more that we see the ability of people to get into the city in a reasonable amount of time, especially if they can hop on the train in Michigan City when the double track is completed and be downtown in 45 minutes, it provides less incentive to have to live necessarily in the thick of it, when you can pay quite a bit less for housing and other amenities.
The other part of this eco city idea, or rustic city, or whatever term you want to use for it, the rustic cities, there'll be a whole bunch of them, is that it also becomes a way for people to envision or to visualize how they're going to be involved in this new community. Maybe they've lived in the heavily urbanized area all their life in Chicago or the near suburbs, but they say, if I move out, well, how's it going to be? If they see that there are community organizations that not only invite but value the outside intelligence that comes in, and they see opportunities to participate in the community, to be part of the civic order, to be part of something bigger than themselves, and not be just a number, in a high rise. Then it seems to me that that's just another reason why you want to have something going, the eco cities idea, or whatever you may want to call it, so that people can get their head around what it is they're moving to. And if the people want to move there, the companies will follow. I mean, it's just unless you're in the mining business, people follow the jobs. If you're in the mining business, the jobs follow the people, unless you're in the mining business.
Right.
The jobs follow the people. If you're in the mining business, the people follow the jobs. You can't take the coal mine someplace where it's nice to live.
That's true.
But I just think that with all that's going on, and especially the changes that were kind of underway that have been accelerated and amplified by the pandemic, I just think that you guys are beautifully positioned to do some new kinds of coordinated on a multi-state regional basis and enabled by the state and by the counties and by the cities themselves that can make a huge difference in the visibility, attractability, and the magnetic appeal of that region to people on the outside.
Well, that is very encouraging to hear. And I think many of the folks that are tuning in right now would agree. I think there are some significant, differential kinds of value propositions, I suppose. I loved what you had to say about where the wealth is created in those transit grids. It's not in the pipeline, it's at the node. And that's something I think regionally, we've had these incredible pipelines and multimodal forms of transportation. We've never really capitalized on the ability to create the nodes, and so that's something that I know there's a lot of momentum around right now. And
it's around the train station where you make the money.
That's right. And there are developers that
and let me say one other thing. I know we're probably running out of time, but the other thing I'd like to suggest is there's a lot of talk in the stuff I read about entrepreneurship and all that, which that's the golden stew for all of us, but as a nation or as individuals or as an economic development mission. But here's an important thing, I think, and that is that, first of all, most people who start businesses fail. That everybody knows that. What they don't know is that most people who fail turn around and try again. And then they may or may not fail. But here's a distinction that I've made for many years, and I think it's really an important one. And that is, I think there are three kinds of people who start businesses. And one is the swashbuckler. He's the guy the man or the woman, actually more women start businesses than men these days, who starts a business because they want to, build it up to a certain point and then sell it off, make big bucks, and then, go do another one or go to Florida and play golf or whatever they're going to do. That's the swashbuckler. And that's the one we always talk about. When we think of an entrepreneur, we always think of the swashbuckler. But there's another kind of entrepreneur, and that's what I call the pilgrim. And the pilgrim is an entrepreneur who's just looking for a better life. He just wants to get a franchise, or he wants to open a filling station, or he wants to start a bakery, or he wants to do something because he's always wanted to bake, or he's always wanted to be his own boss, or he's always wanted to not commute anymore, or whatever the reason may be. He just wants a better life. I met a guy once. I got this idea actually many years ago when I read a story in the Wall Street Journal about a guy in Phoenix, Arizona, who was doing xeriscape, which is using natural, in Arizona, that's cactus in your front yard rather than irrigated grass and irrigated trees and all that. And they said that everybody wanted to franchise him. I went down to Phoenix a couple of weeks later, so I called him up, see if I'd come by and see him, and he agreed. And I said, well, why don't you franchise this thing? Well, by that time, he'd taken me down to show me a couple of places downtown where he'd done xeriscape, and he took me out to some neighborhoods where he'd done xeriscape, where they had cactus instead of grass in their yards and everything. He said, Phil, why would I want to franchise this? He says, today, when somebody comes see me, I can do what I did with you. I can take them and show them the things I've done. He said, my granddaughter is like 8 years old. He said, I've already taken her around and showing her things that I've done, and she's so proud of me. He said, what would I do if I franchised? Show her my spreadsheet? There are people who could be swashbucklers, but they don't want to be swashbucklers. There are a lot more people in our communities who are pilgrims. And then there are explorers. There are people who start something and they want to see if it can go. Maybe they try to become a swashbuckler. Maybe they settle in to be a pilgrim. But no matter what they are, swashbuckler, they're going to create jobs for as long as they're around. They're going to rent space. They're going to buy services. They're going to get somebody to paint their building. They're going to hire somebody to deliver their stuff. They're going to add value to the community and create jobs, maybe for a year, maybe for 20 years, maybe for 100 years. You never know. But you want to be a place that is attractive and inviting to those kinds of people.
Absolutely. The entrepreneurship.
And that's not done on a state level. That's not done on a regional level or a county level. It's done on a city level.
Absolutely. Well,
primarily.
We are working to make sure that our cities have those kinds of connections and resources and the support of the village, because this is something that does, require a multi-stakeholder, multi-jurisdictional kind of apparatus to support it. And I think, if there's a takeaway from our conversation today, that really sticks with me, it's that, we are well positioned in this era that we've entered, where we're located along the Great Lakes, where we're located in proximity to Chicago on all these major throughways. It's going to take a lot of local effort and talent to capitalize on those
and imagination.
Absolutely. But I think this certainly leaves me fired up and and ready to continue the work. And I think the hope is that by this time in a couple of years, we've seen growth in the median household income, we've seen growth in population, we've seen improvements in quality of life that will hopefully be felt for a generation to come. So we are right at our hour mark, and I want to take some time to pivot over to the live stream. So I'll rejoin you here momentarily on the other side, and we'll take some questions for our audience. But thanks again, Phil.
Okay, good.
Well, thank you so much, Phil. It was an absolute pleasure to have the conversation that we did yesterday, and I'm so glad that you're here live today, coming to us from Annapolis, Maryland, here. And I see you're still wearing your ascot, so thank you.
I am. I'm still concerned about your sneezing.
Well, thank you for at least having some visual continuity. Of course, I changed outfits between yesterday and today. But we've gotten some good engagement in the comments so far, and I want to invite our audience participants, if you haven't already, you can log in with your Google account to YouTube. We're taking questions through the comments feature, so just enter your questions in the comments section. I've got a monitor, and we'll read those off on air, and then we'll have probably about 12 to 15 minutes here to discuss before we wrap for today. So. We have actually one here to kick things off. This one came to me via email. I was intrigued by your thoughts about a civic leadership coalition to oversee, guide, and assist the city and town-based economic development initiatives. You call them eco-cities or rustic cities. It seems like we have part of that in place already. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes. I mean, I think you guys have so much in place already, and I think the One Region group and the Northwest Indiana Forum, those are really important elements that are sometimes the hardest to put together. However, those kinds of things have been assembled in other parts of the country. What almost everybody leaves out is the analytical capability. And then number two, they leave out, so you have the forum, which you guys already have. Number two, you need an analytical capability. Number three, you need a technical assistance capability, or what I think it's the best way to think about it is coaching. You want a group, or maybe it's only 2 or 3 people who have an ability to be firefighters. They jump in where there's a problem and they help the problem go away. And that firefighter group is at the regional level. I mean, maybe pulled from all 3 of the counties. And then the fourth one that I didn't mention, but a fourth element of a civic leadership coalition, I think, is a venture capital element. I don't mean venture capital in the conventional sense, but I mean you have a resource, you have the ability to have some money to do things that have to be done. And once again, if you take this whole business that you're entering into as a process, as something that you're going to nurse along, and you're going to coach people, and you're going to learn even as you're going. If you're going to have kind of an agile manufacturing or agile development process where you are changing as you learn, then one of the things you have to be able to do is to invest in a project here or a project there to clarify or to make things happen. And I think that's where you need, a call on to have some resources available, whether it's from a foundation or a corporate foundation or a private foundation or just some project funding that's been put away. So you need those four elements: the forum, the analytical capability, the technical assistance or coaching capability, and the venture capital fund. And I think that on the analytical capability, let me also say that I'm not talking about a staff of people. I'm talking about a person who is very skilled himself or herself, but also because they're at the regional level, but also because they can call on the analytical capabilities that exist in the companies or community organizations that are part of the Civic Leadership Coalition. Sometimes you're going to have to go outside. You don't have those skills inside, or they can't be released from what they're already doing. But and then you'll have a project on the outside. That's where the risk capital is required in order to do that. But those four elements, I think, are the way you really make progress. And though I listened to our conversation that we had last night, and I want to emphasize. Because I'm not sure it was altogether clear when I said it originally, that even though you focus on the cities, that's where the action is. That's where government is. That's where taxes are raised. That's where things can be done. That's where you have levers that can be moved. The coordination, the whole way you think about this is to do it at the regional level. Is to organize people at the regional level so that they can have economies of scale to help each of the cities that's part of the Eco-Cities project.
Right. No, that makes sense. I wonder if what we're trying to do with the kind of the gap financing effort for transit-oriented development is along those lines.
Yeah. I don't know a lot about that, but I mean, I've read about it, and I think, that sounds to me like exactly what I'm talking about. And all these things are being done in your area and in other areas, but very few places have they pulled them all together. And this whole idea that you have a 3-county area or a 4-county area that that can get economies of scale, provide overall leadership and guidance and so on. And then you have the people who are actually doing things, and they're doing them differently. I mean, the fact they're part of what I've called the Eco-Cities Project or the Rustic Cities Project or the South Shore Cities Project, call it whatever you want, that those people are all still doing what they do, but they're doing it in a framework where they have lots of intellectual and know-how and even sometimes financial resources that become available because they're part of this. Plus, they're going to get attention. They're going to get attention from the media, from the local media, the regional media, and sometimes even the national media. And that's going to bring resources in. It's also going to make people say, that's an interesting place. Maybe we ought to look at it as a place to live or a place to move my company.
Right.
Or you're going to get people in the community proud of what the community is doing.
Yeah, outstanding. Well, if somebody jumps in the pool first, other people might come. That's a,
We've
got another great question here from Ty Warner. Ty is the executive director of the Northwest Indiana Regional Planning Commission. Ty asks, can you give some examples of this program office concept you spoke of earlier, where it could be housed, how it would be staffed, et cetera, and maybe an example of where else this has been realized?
Yeah, I think the program office idea is not my idea. It's something that Bain does with its large scale transformation projects, and I was on the receiving end of one of those at Telstra in Australia and saw how it worked, and it's just extremely helpful in keeping you focused, but not just focused. It's really helpful when problems come up and you flood the zone with talent to solve the problem. And you flood the zone, maybe it's people, maybe it's money, maybe it's know-how, maybe it's a piece of software or hardware or some equipment or whatever. It can be anything. You don't know what the problems are going to be. And because you don't know what the problems are going to be, you want to have a standby capability that can jump in there and help you solve it when it comes up. Also, by having a program office, it legitimizes people saying, hey, things aren't going so well. I mean, you have these dashboard things, and that people now have about. They always have green lights on them. They never have red lights on them. Well, why don't they have red lights on? Because you get in trouble if you have red lights. But if you have a program office, the program office wants red lights. The program office is the one, doesn't want them, but a program office exists to turn the red lights green. Right. And so if you're working at the local level, at the community level, or the state or the county level, and you have a program office at the regional level, because that's where you would want to house it, or have, and that may just, like I said, it may just be one person. You go to that person, say, hey, we're having a real problem here. We got a red light on the dashboard. And then that person comes in and looks at it, and you sit down at a table and pull down your masks. And you say, you know, how can we solve this? And you come out of that meeting with a strategy on how to solve it. And then it's the job of the guy who heads the program office to go out and get the human resources or the financial resources or whatever combination of you know, people, space, money, equipment, time, whatever they need in order to, you know, turn that red light green. Yeah. So that's the concept. Now, yeah. Now where I've experienced it in at Telstra, as I said, I've read about it a lot because I was so fascinated by how, because I'm fascinated by people who say, I want, you know, the dogs who want to eat a rabbit, they know they want to eat the rabbit, but the rabbit goes like this. And you know, pretty soon the dog figures it out. When the rabbit goes like that, the dog goes like this because he knows the rabbit's going to go like this, and he grabs him and he eats him. Right. And you know, and what we do in our, you know, hyper rational systems that we've created, if the rabbit goes this way, we go that way. The rabbit goes that way, we go this way. You know, and you never catch the rabbit. Right. You know, you have a lot of activity, you spend a lot of money, but you never eat the rabbit. And what we ought to be in the business of doing is eating the rabbit. And so that's why this program office idea, give it whatever name you want, is so important. And it can also be done at the local level. I mean, you may have a program office at the city level or at the county level, and he talks to the guy at the regional level, and together they turn the red light green. Right. But the key is you make it legitimate to have red lights on the dashboard. And that's the most important thing, because everybody today wants to fudge so that all the lights are green. And then at the end, you wonder why you didn't achieve what you wanted to achieve. Right. Now, where this has been done in economic development is in Australia, interestingly enough, because Australia has taken seriously some of this business about, you know, gardening and hunting. And they've got a set of, I think, 7 or 8 towns around Sydney that are, you know, taking advantage of the fact that even though Sydney is by some measures the most livable city in the world, I've lived there for 4 years. I think it is. You know, a lot of people want to get out of there because of the traffic, because of other reasons. And so these cities around Sydney have developed a cohesive group, but they're all operating independently within this cohesive group, and that cohesive group does have, you know, a capability for looking at the problems that may exist in any one of the participating cities. So it's being done. There are places to learn from. Right. Well, and we have a lot of those municipalities within a stone's throw of Chicago that could fulfill that landscape. And I wonder, you know, hearing you know, this question, this program office concept, you know, there is an initiative that's been growing and picking up some steam, a collaboration between our partners at the Northwest Indiana Forum and at Purdue University Northwest to develop what we're conceptualizing as a regional impact lab. And, you know, a lot of the things that we're discussing here, I think, would naturally kind of fall under that structure, having a kind of a central structural
unit that could help to address some of these opportunities, these challenges as they arise, leveraging the talent that we have from our private sector partners, from our universities, et cetera.
Now, that's okay if the original impact lab is going to make impacts happen and not study impacts.
Right.
That's that's what we need to do. We need, I mean, for example, I read 3 or 4 studies of Northwest Indiana that were really good, but I asked myself, where did these go? I don't know. And that's not a criticism, and I'm not being cynical, either one.
Sure.
I just don't know where they go. And I used to, I was an academic for 20 years of my life. I understand, how it's important it is to do evaluations and do, but they've got to be driven by purpose. They've got to be driven by a mission. They've got to be driven by, so that the results from the study can be acted on.
Actionable.
If you think about voting, it doesn't help a candidate for governor to know, or a candidate for the U.S. Senate or something, or for county commissioner to know that, most educated people vote this way, and most high income people vote that way, and most low income people, because you can't change the income, education, and income of the people who are going to be voting on the next Tuesday. But if you know whether the people read the newspaper or not, or whether they have information or not, you can get them information. You can send somebody to their front step and give them information. You can even stand there and ask them to read it. If they can't read, you can read it to them. I mean, that's actionable. You want to create studies that have actionable variables in them.
So we need an action tank, not a think tank.
Yeah, right. You need an action tank and a message tank, because the messaging on this to your own citizens and to the outside world is very important.
Absolutely. So as we're coming up on time here, I've got one question that came to me via text. There's a really fantastic project that's was actually slated to have a grand opening tomorrow on the shores of Lake Michigan. Unfortunately, due to COVID, it was canceled. We were going to host a reception for a number of folks at the campus of the Digital Crossroad Data Center, which is the first mission-critical data center that's going to be built on the shores of Lake Michigan. And the kind of the buzz around this project has been significant and growing about the implications that could have for more tech-oriented development in Northwest Indiana. And I don't know if maybe as a last question, you could speak briefly on that as we wrap up today about the impact of, the digital connectivity on both, gardening and hunting activities here in Northwest Indiana.
Yeah, well, I think the important thing about that is that a data center will attract the kinds of talent that can become the core of other things happening, spin-offs from that. And I think that we talk when you talk about Silicon Valley and Route 128 and Austin and all those places, those are all scientific complexes that really had their start in universities. But today, scientific complexes oftentimes are anchored by companies, not by universities. Universities are usually around to play a part, and usually play an important part, but they sometimes are not the anchor. And something like this could become the anchor for a scientific complex where Valpo University and Purdue University Northwest and others, and even the Ivy Techs and so on, can play an important role. So I think that, I live not very far from Northern Virginia, where there are a whole bunch of data centers. I spent one day just going through 2 of the data centers. Visa, one of them was Visa, just an amazing place with amazing talent. And I think that, also we have an awful lot of data centers in China, and they shouldn't be there, in my view. And I think one of the things I hope happens in the next few years is the repatriation of data centers back to the U.S. Well, it's really good to have your foot in the door on that one, because if that happens, and I think a lot of people who run these data centers will begin to realize the vulnerabilities of having them stationed in China, will see the value of coming back here, and to be a place that's already doing it can be a great asset.
Absolutely. Well, we're very excited about that development and all of the other things that are percolating here in Northwest Indiana. We're right at time. I want to thank you again, Phil, for taking the time to come and speak with our stakeholders here. I certainly feel encouraged about the opportunities that we have as we emerge into this next chapter post-COVID, in the new economy, to position ourselves as a region on the rise. And I think everybody that's listening and tuning into the presentation today believes in that. So thank you again for all of your insights. I hope that we can bring you out in person here at some point once once it is safe to do so. And I want to thank everybody again on the live stream today for participating. Wish everyone a wonderful holiday season, wonderful and safe and socially distanced holiday season, and looking forward to the year ahead.
Okay, back to the real world.
That's right. Yes.
See you later.